Hi, my name is Barbara, and I am an integrated life advocate with the Third Path Institute, and I am here today with Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm calling in from Grinnell, Iowa, and I am a mom of two girls, and I work full time in the nonprofit and arts management sectors.
Thanks, Erin. I'm so glad we're going to be here today and have this conversation. So, I shared your story with Third Path, and your friend and shared care person Molly will be joining us at some point later in the call or perhaps separately. And your story was so inspiring to me about how your families are integrated in the way of sharing care, being extended family, being you became family of choice. Mm-hmm. And you've all together gone through a whole array of life happenings, some good, some less than good, as much of life is. And so if you could sort of start at the beginning for us and tell me a little bit more. How did you meet? How did you come together? How did it evolve?
Well, I think, some of this was just born of necessity and as many of the best things are. But my family and I moved to Grinnell, Iowa from most recently Toronto, I guess almost 8.5 years ago. So in 2014, my husband and I had a toddler. Nora was 2 at the time, and we moved here for his work at Grinnell College. And we were, completely new in the area. We knew nobody. We were living in a different country, thousands of miles away from our family and communities. So, when we first got here, it was pretty lonely. I am quite an extrovert, so luckily, community building is something that while I didn't realize it was a skill when I think I first moved here, I now recognize as a skill and something that I brought into my professional life as well. But we were here. I couldn't work because of immigration reasons, so I found myself, stuck stuck at the time in a small town where I knew nobody, where I couldn't work. Really feeling isolated from friends and family back home. And Molly and I met, I guess about 6 months after I arrived. I had finally put in place visa arrangements to work at the college. And I actually remember the first day we met, I'd heard her name and knew that she worked at the office I'd be working at. And we literally met outside of the pizza place. Her kids were, 4 and 8, and mine was, like I said, a toddler at the time, my oldest. And we just started chatting, and she said, "Oh, you're going to be working with me," and it was kind of an instant connection. We were both, like I said, I'm an extrovert, so is she. We're both pretty easy conversationalists. So we started working together and then got to know each other very quickly. And she invited my family to an Easter gathering that she was hosting that spring. And basically, that was the first time we celebrated a holiday together. And we have done so pretty much every holiday that one or both of us is in town. Well, I guess both of us are in town since then, at one or both of our houses. So it started as most friendships do. We just sort of clicked, and then pretty soon we started, of course, sharing more and more about our lives. And my husband was going through some severe medical challenges at the time. I then became pregnant with our second child, and while we were thrilled, I was also terrified because I was pregnant again in a new community, relatively new community still, and with a ill partner. So Molly and I connected in many, many ways as friends. And then when I first found out I was pregnant, she was actually the first person I told. And
Oh,
I knew that she had done some doula work. And I said, will you be my unofficial doula? And so that was in 2016, and she was there for the birth of Mary, my youngest, and then we just continued to sort of share life milestones. She and her ex-husband went through a divorce. We're still very close to him as well, and to Molly's kids. And the pandemic, and she had a concussion. So we just started supporting each other through these, like you said, joyful and not so joyful life milestones in, again, an out of necessity way. Her family is likewise out of state. And we realized that so many folks in Grinnell are living close to, family, or are born and raised here or elsewhere in Iowa, or they leave for many holidays. A lot of the college professors, faculty, the minute summer break or Christmas break or fall break, these extended breaks start, they head to second homes or back to other places around the country and world. And that's not feasible for many reasons for us, again, partly because of health and small children and finances. And so we became one another's surrogate family and chosen family through a lot of things. Our kids started calling each other their Grinnell cousins because they didn't have cousins nearby. Yeah, that's kind of like 8 years in a 30 seconds, but I'm sure you have more specific information you want to go
that's
after.
incredible. See, I didn't know the doula part of it.
Yeah.
So, one thing Third Path talks about is this idea of shared care, and it started within a traditional, well, would typically be called the traditional family unit, the partners, and then one working, one doing childcare. Many times that there was childcare that went outside of the home. And was there a way to just bring it in a little bit more, less time and organized childcare, a little more flexibility on each partner's part, looking outside to other family members. And as you mentioned, neither one of you had any family relatives, blood relatives, in the vicinity. But the fact that it goes all the way back to a doula, I mean, talk about an amazing moment of shared care.
And she wasn't practicing as a doula in Iowa, and still isn't, but had told me that she used to practice as a doula in Minnesota. So I was like, well, you should be there, because I knew that obviously, aside from my husband, my mom, or anybody else would probably not be able to be there. And
so I can't help but believe that had a lot to do with the bond too. I mean, you mentioned the two of you hit it off sort of instantaneously, both in personalities and style, but that's something about sharing something so intimate and absolutely life affirming kind of that I think set the stage incredibly well.
Absolutely.
Did you ever have any organized childcare sharing to enable each of you to do your work out of home work?
Not really like formally organized. I mean, Molly was also working full time when we first met. So, we were both using various childcare services in town. Her kids, being a bit older, had primarily after school care, and mine were in daycare. But certainly the informal weekend, and like I said, when Mark was sick, my husband was sick, there was a lot of I need to go to the hospital. I need to take him to the hospital now. And I had, either before Mary was born, a toddler, or then a preschooler and a baby, and would be just dropping them off with whoever was available. Especially when Mary, my youngest, was first born, and we didn't have her in childcare. And so often that was Molly if she was able to, if she was home on a weekend, or other friends who we did have some other friends who were home with younger children at that time, who have since gone back to full-time work outside of the home. But there was definitely a village of friends who I could call. It's one of the beautiful things about a small town like Grinnell is you get connected relatively quickly to more people within your, we have kids similar ages, we meet each other at whatever the case may be. And so, there were a lot of informal childcare exchanges happening sort of in that broader village, where I would just drop off my kids for, an hour or sometimes a day, because like I said, we had some pretty unpredictable health stuff happening. So so nothing more formally organized, unless during the pandemic we bubbled, I guess, was sort of what families were doing. So during the pandemic, when they were in town, they had a cabin outside of Iowa, but when they were here, we also decided to kind of be a little bubble, so that when we were in the same physical location, we would see one another, to prevent some of that loneliness. And again, because we didn't have sort of blood relatives with whom to decide to create those little safe communities, we did that together. So.
It's terrific. Yeah, I remember, I think we came along just a little bit before the bubble, and remember hearing your stories, and then that you were able to be that support system with each other, during the pandemic. You talked a bit about the college too, and Mark is faculty there. How much is the college? I think there are some other people who were neighbors of yours also who were with the college, John and Angela. At one point you mentioned to me that, so as kind of tying that thread or going a little bit there.
Yeah, so they also in the same sort of community. We actually met them. They're colleagues of Mark's. They work in the same. John works in the same department on campus as Mark. And so they, at the time, did not have their own grandbabies. They do now, but they were active, working people, but whose children were grown up, and so they were sort of our surrogate. Not quite old enough to be my grandparents, but surrogate grandparents who, because they didn't have little kids, also played a vital role. So of course, as much as Molly has been my go-to person to call in these crises, of course, with her own two small children or young children at home at the time, when a lot of the crises were unfolding, I couldn't necessarily call her in the middle of the night. But John and Angela also played a huge role in, they took Nora when I was going into labor, and things like after Mark's surgery, when there was an emergency, they were the people who came to the house at 4 a.m. in a snowstorm, kind of thing. The kind of thing like you would call your mom usually, or your uncle, or whatever. Right. That's kind of, no matter how close you are with friends, that's a pretty hard thing to call someone who's not a blood relative and say, it's 3 a.m. and this emergency is happening, can you come over? I mean, it's a hard thing to learn, to ask for that kind of help, and to find the kind of people that you can ask for that kind of help when you're away from sort of that, like you said, traditional extended family unit. So we've been really lucky to have those folks who stepped in for us, and
And it sounds like you've just done an amazing job of finding that strength to ask, finding people who are receptive and willing, and that's so much the purpose of what Third Path is trying to do, and in building this story library, so that other people who may not have thought of this, or are beside themselves of where do I look? It's intimidating, it's lonely, it's scary, but knowing that we can always build if we're willing to take that step. And as you talked about, it just kind of starts happening.
Well, and I think, I think sometimes, unfortunately, it takes these moments of crisis to learn how to ask for help, but also how to offer help. I mean, before we moved here, I broke my ankle when Nora was a tiny baby, and I wasn't weight bearing, and I was working full time, and Mark was working full time, and luckily we had, I was in Canada where most of my friends were on a good solid year-long parental leave that we still don't have here, but and they were able to step in, and I needed it. I didn't have much of a choice, and as much as it's hard on your pride when someone says, well, I'm going to come over and fold your laundry, like literally fold your underwear. I had a 9-month-old baby, and I couldn't walk, and I couldn't even stand up to get to my overhead dryer to get that out. I was in a wheelchair for 8 weeks, so we're on crutches. So and the same year that in that same group of friends, a friend of mine's husband, tragically had a very quickly progressing cancer and passed away. And I think it was, that year we all learned how to both ask for and accept and offer help in a really meaningful way, where beside the, let me know what I can do, which is always from a place of the best possible intentions. And it's not to say that folks shouldn't say that, but sometimes when someone's in a crisis or, just overwhelmed, you can't even think of what, even though that person means it, like, I can't even process what it is I need to ask for. And I think especially having that offered to me when I had my ankle broken and was suffering from postpartum depression, and I was just like, I don't even know where to start. And literally people saying, I'm coming over to wash your laundry, to, literally do your laundry, and to take your dog for a walk, and to identify for me those things and just say, I'm doing that. And it was kind of like, oh, no, I'll figure it out. But then you just be like, you know what? No, like, swallow that pride. This is what I think also just recognizing, like, we want to help one another. I think most people want to help one another, and they don't necessarily know how. And so when we allow people to help us, I also think that is a really beautiful act, to accept the help that is offered, even when it feels icky, because we have this idea that we're supposed to be, all powerful, independent, something, which is just, it's a super cliche saying in many ways, but the it takes a village thing is just so true to me. Our modern society has placed us in these kind of isolated little clusters where, the humans have evolved to rely on a village, and we need to create those in different ways now in more urban settings. And so I think one of the most basic ways we can do that is to accept help when it's offered to us. So I think, then helping my friend through her husband passing away, meant showing up and mowing the lawn. Didn't mean we were going to say, hey, Bree, can I help you? We literally just showed up with, and got the lawnmower out of the garage and mowed her lawn. And I think the most basic, of course, is food, like,
yeah.
when you don't know what else to do, often organizing a food train or just bringing by food is sort of the first thing. We need nourishment, for our bodies, and often you see, communities do that first, but then beyond those immediate needs, there's so many other things. And so I think going through those experiences where I, had this, minor but still really hard life thing where I broke my leg, and then followed so closely by my friend's husband passing away, really was just a year where I went, oh, this is how you both accept and offer help in a more meaningful, tangible, immediate way. And I think it does rely on a certain amount of closeness, but at the same time, I had people that I'd only met a couple of times, in a breastfeeding support group, come over and just say, hey, I'm taking your dog for a walk.
Right.
So-and-so asked me to, so I'm here.
Exactly. Yeah. Fabulous examples, inspiration examples, and all of those they're bite-sized, small enough things to do that everyone needs to eat. So even outside of crisis mode or tragedy mode, being able to step in and share care around those kinds of things, or trading skills. And I see that Molly has joined us, which is terrific. So I am going to admit Molly, and we'll kind of carry on the conversation, and I'll have her recap or share a bit of, here we go. Here comes Molly. Give a little perspective. Hi, Molly. I see your name on the screen. Are you with us, Molly? I'm going to text her.
I just did. Can't hear you yet.
Can't see you either. Maybe she stepped away for a moment because she was waiting, and I told her we'd be right with her. Okay, well, we'll just give her a minute, and Molly, if you can hear us whenever you're ready, just chime on in. And we'll wrap up whatever thread we're on, and we'll go back and we'll give you a chance to share your side of coming together and how your extended family, integrated family has evolved. So I'm going to just take a peek here. You shared so much, Erin. Do you want to talk about, you've gotten in multiple generations, other community members, a lot of the challenges you face, certainly what led you to this approach. One of the questions was what inspired you, and I think you're very of need for sure. In the first place, was there anything else, or if you had immediate family, blood relatives around, do you think this relationship would have evolved? Or
that's interesting to think. I mean, I grew up with a very close.
Molly.
I grew up with my extended family really close by, so yeah, it's interesting to think about that. I think I grew up in a system where we did rely heavily on grandparents, aunts, uncles, but also good friends, and in a small town where I think those things in some ways develop more easily. So it's hard to know, but I think ultimately it's whether you have that blood family or immediate family around. I think it just is about the absolute necessity of community, and like that. Again, I mentioned earlier, humans have evolved to need this kind of support, and when we are thrust in these situations where and I think so much of the modern capitalist urban world makes that really hard. We move where jobs are. It makes it really hard to find those communities and villages. And so I just think regardless of where you find them, whether from family chosen or born into family, that it's just all about the necessity of that extended network.
Well, and here is the other half of your extended network. Glad you could join us, Molly. So,
hi.
We kind of opened with Erin talking of how you met and how you came to be. And I had told the third path folks that I'm working with when they were looking at this project of, it's really this idea of shared care and who are the others that an immediate family, traditionally two partners, if you want to be super traditional, male, female, man, wife, but really the idea of two adults and a child or children, pets even, and I know you both have pets, so maybe you want to talk a little bit about that also. But how do you work? How do you pursue personal interests, which I know is kind of a chuckle when your children are young. It's like, oh no, we wait down the road for those. But both of you are involved in community, and but so that's what they were looking at this idea of shared care beyond the two individuals figuring out what their work schedules, their child care schedules are going to be, and bringing others, and not in the sense necessarily of paid child care, not a nanny or going out, but usually family. So I got involved in this because of my relationship and John, my husband, moving out here to be part of our grandchildren's lives to be part. So then as this group of grandparents was meeting with the third path team, they were like, there's other ways people share care, and who do we know out there? And the two of you immediately came to mind with your incredible story that's so inspirational. So Molly, if you want to take a few minutes and from your memory and perspective, what brought you to the fold with Erin and Mark and children and the evolution there?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm not sure, Erin, it would have been fun for me to hear what you said, Erin, because my memory might be a little different than her memory of it all. Erin, did you talk about, do you have that same memory of one of my kids, what they kind of said to declare us family?
I mentioned that we like the Grinnell Cousins things, but I didn't mention how it started or where it started.
Well,
I don't know if I remember.
Yeah, well, I remember, I think it was my kids. I'm not sure. So, I don't know how much I need to introduce myself, but so I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I think Kai and Ruby, and I think it was Kai, right when we met, or probably not right when we met, but a little bit, probably, I don't know, after a year, maybe our families were together. I remember actually we were here in the house and he said, Mom, it seems like everybody in Grinnell has cousins. We have no cousins. We have no, and it is true, specifically in Kai's grade. I know that most of his friends in his classroom all were like, I mean, so much that they had so many cousins that in kindergarten, when I asked one of Kai's little buddies' moms if we could have a play date, she smiled and she laughed. She said, "That's so cute." And I said, "I'm not trying to be cute. What do you mean that's so cute?" And she said, "Well, we don't really do play dates. We just get together with cousins." And so we had certainly kind of felt that and experienced this idea that people are primarily, especially in the younger age with kids, with their extended family. So it was sometime after this that Kai said, I wish we had cousins. We don't have any cousins. So I think we need Grinnell Cousins. And so therefore, that's when kind of our family, we started calling each other Grinnell Cousins and Grinnell aunts and uncles, and we're going to be each other's Grinnell family. And I think it really came from that idea that, I don't know how old he was at the time, let's say 7, 8, I don't know, but he looked around and realized, like, we're not like everyone here. We need a family. And I think that was, I see that such a gift because it really made me realize, like, yeah, what if we actually did go about this like family? And what if our kids, could see each other as family and have more close adult relationships and really consider them family, not just like mom's best friend. So when that happened, I was married. Now I'm not. So I'm a single mom now. And, it's interesting to look at how that evolved. I would say we were very present in each other's life when I was married, and certainly now it has changed in a different way, being single. But it's kind of funny that I don't necessarily remember all the details, because now it feels like at this point, it just feels like we've been kind of each other's Grinnell family from the get-go, even though I know we haven't.
Could you both talk a little bit? I love the reference you made to aunts and uncles.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about that. And I know each set of kids has spent individual time with the others,
Mm-hmm.
which, many children are uncomfortable doing, any kind of sleepovers
Mm-hmm.
with friends or out of their own home or so. Talk a little bit more about that, whatever comes to mind to you around that idea of aunt and uncle and caring for somebody else's children.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll jump first, maybe, Erin. Is I remember, so it would be now 2 years ago. Would it be when Ruby had her appendix out, Erin? I think it was like 2 years ago. I had maybe it was 3 years ago. It was during the middle of the pandemic. I remember that. But this is a great example of something that would have happened, which is that we went to the hospital here in Grinnell. Ruby had a stomach ache. I called Mark and Erin and said, hey, we're going to the hospital. Kai is old enough to be by himself, but not old enough to be by himself overnight. I don't know. I think at that point I wasn't thinking we'd be overnight. But anyways, we ended up being taken by ambulance to Blank's Children's Hospital in Des Moines. And, it wasn't even a second thought that I was like, okay, Erin and Mark, I need help with Kai. And if I remember right, because I there's been so many, I guess, different situations, but I think one of them came over here to stay with Kai here because he felt more comfortable here than at their house. So, I think part of this is also not just, it's knowing each other's kids really well too. And they knew that in this situation, Kai would be more comfortable here. I think maybe Mark came with one of the girls here because, of course, their girls are so excited to be here to have a sleepover. I think it was Nora came to have a sleepover with their cousin Kai was a big deal. And, just that idea of what would I do without that in the middle of the night? Who are my middle of the night people? And that really is when people kind of ask me about my life in Grinnell, I think about the second month I moved here to Grinnell. I got food poisoning in the middle of the night. And my now ex-husband, but Joe, he, in the middle of the night, he said, I think we have to call the ambulance. You're so sick. And I said, we don't have anyone to come to stay with the kids. We can't call the ambulance. We have to stay here. We just moved here. We have no family. We have, no friends really yet. I can't go. And what, fast forward, and what a difference to then, in that moment when I really needed someone, not only having someone come over, but someone knowing my kids well enough to know exactly what the situation needed to be and who needed to go where and how it was going to look. And I could just stay, and take care of the situation. And I think whenever we were discharged, it was, again, they came to pick us up in Des Moines to get us back home, to get us situated. Just in a way, if I was in Minnesota where my family lived, that's what I would have been doing, calling my mom. That would have been my mom I was calling in the middle of the night saying, come help. So I feel really, really so grateful for that, just because I remember that feeling of not having that, and what an incredible feeling now knowing I do have those people that, and that's kind of an extreme example. It happens in other ways too, that maybe aren't quite as extreme.
Yeah, Molly, that was actually the story that popped to my mind too, with Ruby's appendicitis. But there's been lots of other more fun sleepover events too. Well, Mary barely talked until she was 3, and I was just thinking one of her first sentences was "Me no yike people, me oni yike Momo," which is what my kids call Molly. So for a while, like, Mary just was like, "No, I don't like anybody except for Molly." So I was just laughing at that, dynamic. So she's still, kind of her favorite, but yeah, like, my kids are perfectly happy to go to Molly's overnight, but I know that all these kids don't like necessarily spending time out of their own beds. So that's fine. We can go over there. So yeah, like Molly said, it really does require a certain amount of like, or not even require, but it makes it even much easier that we have that that understanding of one another's kids in a pretty beautiful way, where like they we know where to step in a certain way. I think it's also funny because you know when somebody has crossed that line from like your mom's best friend to like family, when your kids show their not best self,
Totally.
Because like if you're with like somebody they're trying to impress, they never fight or they never argue in front of those kinds of friends. But I would say that both of our kids have had their moments of showing their not best selves.
Yes.
But, which actually is such a beautiful thing. Like I love that Molly's kids feel safe enough to let their big feelings happen with us there. And I love that my kids have that safety person as well, where they know they can have a meltdown. They can have a really bad day and not feel judged or unwelcome or unsettled in that way. So yeah.
And also I think we just had a situation last week where my 12-year-old was going in to take a voice lesson with Erin, and she came in crabby as can be. I hadn't talked to her. She got out of school. She said something was wrong, but she didn't want to talk about it. By the time I dropped her off with Erin, not only knowing that like Erin was going to be doing music with her, but also knowing it was going to be Erin. And I thought, well, God, if anyone can do it, it can be Erin. She knows how to read Ruby. We'll see what happens. And she comes out, Ruby came out singing as happy as can be. And I was like, Erin, I have no idea what you did. I don't even need to know kind of what happened. All I know is thank you, because now she is, her big feelings have been processed a little bit better. And sometimes, I think we all know this, that kids need someone other than their parents to do it. And actually, I was just thinking also, Erin, of the story of, I think you guys took Nora to Disney World and you left Mary with us. And Mary must have been little, like 1, 2. And she was with us. She couldn't fall asleep. And I remember it was in the middle of the night and I was up and I was trying to help, like maybe she had woken up in the middle of the night. And so I was trying to help her fall back to sleep. And Ruby would have been how many years older? She was small. I will say Ruby was small. And Ruby, I remember getting up and she said, Mom, let me do it. And she is walking around holding Mary as like, so little, holding her, saying, Mom, don't worry, I got her. She likes when I hold her. And I just remember thinking, I'm not sure if this is the way it should be. It's like 2:00 in the morning and my younger daughter is up doing it. But it was like such a sweet thing of like, not only does it sometimes Momo needs to be there, but sometimes one of their Grinnell cousins can be who they need to kind of help, get them back on track.
Well, I remember, joking that, we would be at pre-pandemic. So, I mean, Mary was 3 at the beginning of the pandemic. So, I mean, this was before that. And we'd be at, community things. And Ruby at like 8, 9 years old would be walking around with Mary just on her hip. And I would joke about how like I trust that 8-year-old with my baby, like my 1-year-old or my infant, more than I would trust most 18-year-olds. Like she was just so she'd been holding her since she was a couple days old. She just it was a really lovely. We have pictures of Ruby wearing like the baby carrier, and like it takes up her whole body, but she would beg to wear the baby carrier
she would.
She could carry Mary.
Right, she totally would. And I will say also now she's also the first person to or Kai, both my kids would too also sometimes take on that older, like more cousin or sibling role, and we'll tell them to knock it off if someone's fighting, or we'll say no, you can't do, like quit hitting each other, be nice. They kind of take on that role that I certainly have seen more in like that family cousin way, of which you can tell your cousin that they're being obnoxious maybe in a different way than you can say to your friend.
So I'm hearing so much trust came from this time together, bits and pieces, lots of experiences, time together in different combinations. And yeah, I remember when we came to town seeing Ruby carrying Mary
Oh, yes.
around. So incredible benefits for you all, incredible benefits for the kids. If you were giving some life hacks or shared care hacks to other families that were trying to do this, are there a couple of points that come to mind? I know early on in the conversation we were talking about some other things, but Erin mentioned being willing to receive, being able to offer, and how to go about doing that. Other things that come to mind that would be helpful tips and resources?
I guess one of the things I remember back when I lived in Minneapolis, I had this kind of thing when someone would move to the new neighborhood. I would go over, and even if I didn't need it, sometime in the first couple of weeks, I would ask for a cup of sugar. And I remember someone saying to me, "Why do you go and ask neighbors for a cup of sugar if you don't need a cup of sugar?" And I said, "Well, if I ask for a cup of sugar, they're going to know then that I can be the family they can ask for a cup of sugar, and that's the way we build community." And I think about that, and that is actually me asking before I was giving, right? And I think Erin and I just actually had a conversation this week just about this, about giving and receiving, how there's seasons for that. Because I know we've talked a lot here about caring for each other's children, but it also has been that Erin and Mark have cared for me. I mean, we care for each other as adults. I'm thinking specifically when Mark was in the hospital, and Erin at some point got really sick and couldn't care for him in the hospital, and so Joe and I, in the middle of a snowstorm, went to take care of him and make sure he had someone with him and was receiving the care he needs. And I think there is that season of when, this is our conversation this week, of times when I have been more the one who, and maybe you mentioned this already, Erin, so I apologize if I'm saying the same thing, but sometimes there's just different seasons of needing and the giving and receiving. But how does it start out? I really do think it starts off with someone being vulnerable enough to ask for that cup of sugar, or whatever way it would be. And certainly there was that instant connection with Erin and I that, that part I can remember, Erin, when we met, but I'm not quite sure exactly of kind of when it transformed into this next step. But of course, we knew each other enough to know that, this is the family that I want to be close with. And I think once we kind of made that decision, of course, as you have all these experiences, you become closer and closer as, you rely on each other. And it's also times during the, I was a single mom during COVID, and we potted with each other. And, that looked like Mark making dinner, bringing it over to our house. We were together and we'd have dance parties, or, like kind of that, also the shared of who's cooking, who's hosting, knowing that my first, the top of my list is not, I don't love to cook. But hey, Mark likes to cook. I'd much rather organize a house and get board games ready to go. Kind of also looking at what are our strengths. So this would not have worked if the recipe for this was that I was going to be the cook, and I was, I'm trying to think of if I was going to do things that aren't actually my skill set, this probably wouldn't work. But I think we kind of figured out what each other's skill set is. And, when push comes to shove, knowing, we will all jump in and do whatever it takes.
Yeah, I think what Molly said about showing that vulnerability, to ask for the proverbial cup of sugar. And I was thinking I try to think too of when was the first time that happened with us. And I don't really remember. I mean,
Mhm.
I remember crying in the office when my dog died, and feeling like that was a safe, like that I could just like that was okay just to have emotions with my coworker who was also had become my friend by that point, but things like that. And just I also remember one of our first conversations, we joke about this a lot, about like feeding our babies other people's breast milk and like using donated breast milk. And we were like, I would totally have fed your baby my breast, like, and we just kind of, I think that made us both recognize like, okay, we have a similar philosophy here where like, that is such an intimate way
right
of caring for one another's families, but a very real, very needed thing, like, and I think it was actually back to the broken ankle story, Barb, that somehow it came up that like when I had my broken ankle, one of my friends dropped off like donated breast milk because I had to have be on morphine for my surgery and couldn't feed the baby. And she was like, oh yeah, I remember having to like use my friend's breast milk. And so like I think we just sort of established somehow like that we were the people that
like-minded,
we could be vulnerable with.
Yeah.
Right.
But I also love, Barb, like back to what you said about different combinations. I think that like that really made some bells go for me because like I consider Molly like my best friend, but also she and Mark are really, really close. And they've spent lots of time, just the two of them, through work, through other things. And same with Joe. Like Joe comes, when Joe's home for holidays, he comes to our house for Thanksgiving, whether or not Molly's in town, because we do family holidays together, and we kind of established that. And I think the kids, obviously, like Molly, I don't want to speak about your divorce and put words in your mouth, but I think divorce is one of those hard transitions for everybody. But I think having this extended family has helped normalize that for Molly's kids too. Like it's still family Thanksgiving when we all get together.
Exactly. We just had that conversation this week about we're doing Thanksgiving. It'll be Joe and me and the kids. And I know Ruby's like, so it's going to be just regular family Thanksgiving. And I said, yeah. And I said, well, and isn't this funny that I was like, well, yeah. And, Erin's mom and dad are going to be there too. And, which is so funny because usually it'd be the opposite, right? It'd be like, yeah, we're going over to Erin's mom and dad and their family, but instead I was like, yes, with our family we're also going to have other family members.
Well, and same with your mom though, right? Like we've had times where it was with your mom there and my parents weren't there for different, like, so which is really lovely. Like, I mean, my kids call your mom Nani, right? Because that's just what your kids call her. They don't call her Joan, right?
Right. And I also think to myself about, so my ex-husband Joe is now living out of state, and just how important it is for your girls also to see him, how excited they are to see him when he comes. And I think we all recognize like these relationships, adult relationships, are so important for our children. I see it more now. I remember Erin at one point, I can't remember what kid, I think it was Kai, that you said, Kai, I'm your safe person you can call if it's, I mean, we were kidding around. Like, you're like, if it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you've been drinking and you need an adult to call, you better call me. I'm your person to call and we'll get you home, no questions asked or whatever. This was a while, we kind of laughed, but I thought, oh yeah, we better have all those adults, right? That can rally around our kids when they don't want to talk to me about something. That's okay. You have these 2 other trusted adults that you can go to who, I trust with anything and know that they will be able to, point you in the right direction or whatever the case may be.
Thinking about Molly, for some reason that reminded me of Kai's going away party. And we all did such a good job of keeping our, together. Like we were all like, oh, we're all just celebrating it because Kai's going to school. Going to school out of state right now. And we were all like pretending really well. Like I was like, I'm not going to cry because I'm not going to be that person, and I need to be strong for you. And Nora, my oldest, was the one who just like lost it. Like, she went to give Kai a hug and she just like burst into sobs. And of course we all started crying.
I know. And she was like, Kai, like, I mean, you're right. That was just like, I think for me, I had been thinking about, with my mama's heart, thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to let him go to school? This is so hard. And then seeing that, I thought, oh, it's not just his sister, it's his Grinnell cousins too, who are going to miss him, terribly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
And Molly, I think just to circle back to what you said about looking after one another and our adult care for one another has been so central too. I mean, as it happens, we've had, a pandemic and some massive health crises, like on both sides. Mark was really sick, you were really sick. And I don't even know how we would have got through some of that. I can't even imagine what we would have done without sort of the extended family support there, because
no, I don't either.
This is the amazing part of your story. So, we can take sort of the black and white of like, okay, work-life integration, and how does, having other people in our life, especially helping us with our dependents, and later on there's the elder care issue, right? How does it enable us basically to go to work and pursue our goals and our interests? But what is so rich and deep, the reality is it's providing structure for the children. You use the word relationships, and that's what life is all about. And then you've pointed out the caring, the shared caring of each other, which strengthens, gives you confidence, gives you fortitude, gives you food and basics to be able to get up and go out the door and get what you need to do done in the world, pursue your work, pursue your purpose, have trust and confidence that you can do this because you have these pillars holding you up, and the pillars are holding your kids up, and it really is this big interdependent web. I mean, we hear that phrase of the interdependent web, and sometimes it sounds cliche, but your story here is showing all those many, many ways in which it is so critical, and it can also take many, many forms. So it isn't just, two of the people in your pod being the primary caregivers, caretakers. You've got all these layers across adults and children to children. So it takes that shared care in so many ways.
Yeah. And, I don't, until you were just talking, I think a really interesting part of this, and Erin, you mentioned this, but up to this point, probably in my life, the relationships that I have that have felt most similar to this, I mean, this is actually, I don't really have, this is a very unique, but the ones who have felt most similar is probably just with another mom, that maybe another mom and I are sharing pickup, or a little bit, maybe not quite as complex as what we do. But I do think it's a good point what you said, Erin, that this really is, sometimes it's Mark calling me and asking me to do a pickup. Right now Joe lives out of town, but this isn't just like mom to mom, like we're figuring this out, which I think is much more common, and I have experienced that more. This is more even it might even be one of my kids texting saying, I need a ride. It could be, especially now with where I work, I'm not always, really my kids can't always get a hold of me, and they know, like, if you need to, you get a hold of Erin or Mark and ask them for what you need if something comes up. But I do think that makes it unique in just that way, that it does work, all of us, not just Erin and I coordinating it for everyone else in the family. And I wish that was more common, but again, it's usually the women kind of doing this lots of times. I mean, I guess, Erin, we might say that we do a lot of that, but I think it's really us as a whole family unit trying to share some of that, that workload together.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, yeah, Joe isn't living in town right now, but I mean, um, he didn't he one day just go in by himself to visit Mark in the hospital too? Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
it's not like, yeah, it's not just reliant on one of the adults or the
Yeah.
women in those
Mm-hmm.
more stereotypically traditional caregiving roles
Mm-hmm.
to coordinate
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, you know, Especially now that Mark's healthy.
Yeah.
When he wasn't,
Right.
it was different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Any crystal balls? What do you think? The kids are getting older. Your work and your careers and your pursuits are expanding and going in some different directions. Molly, you have a new, very significant role
Mm-hmm.
for the campus and the
Mm-hmm.
program you just alluded to. You're not always
Mm-hmm.
reachable.
Mm-hmm.
Erin is pursuing new expanded ventures in the arts realm with music. You mentioned Kai. So Kai is now at a boarding high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you could have a sense of kind of what's to come.
I think it's funny. If you had asked us 8 years ago where our lives would be, I can guarantee that neither of us would like. I mean, when you think about what has
Neither.
changed in 8 years, like
Oh God.
literally another human. Like Mary wasn't here, and Kai's in boarding school, and Molly and Joe got divorced, but we're still really all tight. Like
We
I
couldn't
don't.
have,
I think
right.
if anything, like this, our relationship has, and maybe that's just the phase of life too. But like just how unpredictable everything is, and not to mention a pandemic, a head injury, brain surgery, like the
Me
stuff that has
quitting my
happened in that eight
job.
years.
Right.
I just kind of feel like
Right.
no predictions, but I really do, and maybe this sounds super cheesy, corny, but I'm not afraid of cheesy, corny, but I do have just a confidence that I didn't have that like we'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I do think that there's a certain amount of comfort that comes with having that kind of like support that knows that we've gone through a heck of a lot of stuff that none of us could have predicted.
Mm-hmm.
But like Molly said, we're having Thanksgiving together in a couple of weeks, and after that, I'm sure we'll talk about what's going on for Christmas. I mean,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so one thing at a time. But yeah, just I
Yeah.
certainly don't have any doubt that when the crap happens and also when the really good stuff happens, that this will continue.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. In
Yeah,
the same way it would if we
agree.
were family from birth, because it really
Mm-hmm.
just feels like that. I mean, sometimes I think
Mm-hmm.
8 years, I've only known Mom for 8 years. Like what?
I know.
But
That's when you said that. I was like, what? It's got to be more than 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment I was telling you when Ruby had her appendix out, we had actually just spent, I think it was 4 or 5 months kind of off and on, but mainly on up at our cabin in northern Minnesota during the pandemic. And we were trying to actually, it was right that week when Ruby had her appendix out that we were trying to decide whether I was going to enroll the kids up in northern Minnesota where our cabin is in school there. It was just, it was in Minnesota. It felt safer during the pandemic. And I thought, really, I just couldn't make the decision that I was going back and forth. And, it wasn't going to be forever, but it was certainly going to be another few months. And I thought, it will be safer for the kids. I will be up, where I love at my cabin, but it was also knowing it would just be me and the kids in this cabin with no running water in the middle of a Minnesota winter with no friends really. Right. And when Ruby had her appendix out, it was about 4:00 in the morning that night after I had called them. They were, taking care of the dogs, because not to mention, like you said, Barb, we have animals too, that we let each other's animals out. Right. But like they were taking care of the dogs, they were taking care of Kai. And it was at 4:00 in the morning when Ruby was like wheeled into her surgery that I was like, gosh, there is no way that I am going to Ely. I have got to be where my community is, especially in the midst of a divorce and just a lot going on. I was like, what am I thinking? I need community right now. I need my people more than ever, even though having people during the pandemic look different, And so that's when really Erin and Mark and I were like, okay, like if I move back to Grinnell, part of it is we have to kind of pod together, like, a extended family in that way, because, we both were like, and that in itself, I mean, that could be a whole nother thing of just talking about during the pandemic, right? Like how, just even how that shifted. We had to make, for us to pod together, it meant that our kids who have other, best friends who are their age, that meant they couldn't see that wouldn't be an option. We really worked I feel like Erin, we did that really well together. And that was all about open communication so much,
Especially because there was my family in Nova Scotia was living somewhere where there was such strict guidelines. The government was saying, this is how many people you're allowed to see, and this is exactly how to pod. And we were kind of just like trying to figure it out. I think we were probably among the most cautious people in our extended peer group for sure. I mean, so when Molly would come, like when they would come home from the cabin, we tried really hard to quarantine. So every time that they would come home, we would try to wait those 2 weeks if they had seen anybody. So they would stop and see her mom, and then we would try to do the 2 weeks before we saw each other when they got home. And I remember one night, I don't know, I think it was right after Mom or before, somewhere around when Ruby had her surgery anyway, that you got home and there was a bat in the house.
Yes.
And so I came over and we were supposed to be quarantining, right? We were like, they had just seen Molly's mom after they had been in isolation at the cabin. And then we were supposed to do the 2 weeks. And Molly was like, but I need you to come over with a bat. And like, I had a mask on. And I remember after a few hours, we were just like, this is ridiculous. Like, okay, like I'm just going to take off my mask. Because we know we're gonna see each other. Like, I'm already here. We're gonna after these 2 weeks, but like for the most part, we were just so careful, and we had that shared trust because we both had high risk family members, right? Like Mark was high risk, and we had some other concerns health wise with the kids. So, we were being so careful, but yeah, just like even those silly little things, like when you just get home and your dogs are running around and there's a bat in the house, like you call in the middle of a pandemic to help you get the damn bat out.
Not to mention, Barb, you seeing that you're my neighbor. Barb, seeing that your neighbor, you can imagine we opened up one of the windows in my living room. And we are literally, if I still wish someone, I think we did have it on video. The kids started videotaping it because I was like, I am so brave. I am so brave. I can do this. We're trying to get the bat off of it was on a precine.
It was really like,
we're screaming.
Yeah.
We're screaming at each other.
We're in tears. It was really funny.
I'm like, you're brave. I'm brave. We can do this. And then the funny thing is I looked out and there were these 2 neighbors. I don't even know who they were, who had been watching us, laughing hysterically outside, watching the 2 of us screaming, you're brave. We're strong. We can do this. Yeah. So like, who are you going to call when there's a bat? Like, that is a very important thing. All of us must know.
What a great tagline right there. Who you gonna call, right?
Right.
And I just can't get over. I can't wait to send this to the team.
Oh, good.
Because there's so many rich, deep stories in there. And Erin, gosh, I can't even remember where we were back here, but I think you were talking about when I asked the question for the future, and you talked about this benefit is even too small a word. I can't even think of the right word, but what you all have taken away from this experience is such an inner strength, a growth, a development for the future. Like, you are now brave. You're brave. You're strong. You can do this because of how you've been there, free for each other.
Or when
Mhm.
when we're not, like, because sometimes we're just not, that the other one can step in, like what Molly was saying earlier about like alternating. Like
Yes,
when Mark was really sick,
And I'm saying, right.
we
Yeah.
were in like we were the needing. Like when Mark was really
Yeah.
sick, it was
Yeah.
so much receive. And then when Molly had her head injury, we were able to give back. And I remember especially Mark feeling, you know, like as the person who had been really sick, he said, you know, it feels so good now because I felt so guilty for so long, accepting all the help. And it, you know, but that, well, going back to full circle, Barb, to what we were talking about at the very beginning, you know, this willingness to swallow that pride and receive the help, I think really is a humbling experience that allows you to step in and give the help in a much more tangible way. Molly, I was saying earlier before you got on about like the whole let me know what I can do, which always comes from such a good place. But the difference between that when you are in crisis and just like doing it, and how I think, you know, we're well past the let me know what I can do point.
And knowing that, I mean, I feel like, Barb, we could go on and on talking, but, you know, like, I think being in a rural community also, you know, in the middle of a crisis, if you live in rural America, for example, for me, I couldn't drive after my head injury. And so every single doctor's appointment was not here in Grinnell. It was an hour away. And I had to find someone to drive me. And lots of times it was Mark who would, the majority of the time, Mark, you know, and, you know, that means taking a half a day to bring someone to a doctor's appointment. I mean, we're talking about pretty significant, or driving in the snowstorm to, you know, get someone at the hospital or whatever it is, you know, it creates challenges that make even more so, I think, not having extended family in Grinnell, in a rural town that's isolated, even trickier, just because they're really, you know, like, recently there was someone in our community who had taken an ambulance to a hospital, and I said to her, I'll come and get you and your child who had been in the ICU. And she's like, you know, they had just moved here. She's like, well, no, I'm just going to take an Uber. And I was like, no, you're not going to take an Uber. I know how that is. I know how much that's going to cost. And, you know, there's not even Ubers will come to Grinnell, for goodness sakes. Right. Like, I'm coming to pick you up. And of course, I'm extending that to this family because I've had people, you know, who are my support, who have always extended that to me. So.
Talking of others and new members coming into the community, especially with the college being such a part of the community here and new families coming in, has anyone approached the two of you, or Mark or Joe when he's in town, looked at what you've created and with do you have a recipe? Do you have a blueprint? Can you can you coach us through doing this with anyone else?
I would say, speaking for both Emily and I, that, or Emily, why do I keep calling you Emily?
Yeah,
that's my boss.
Coworker is Emily. She does know
Oh my goodness. Okay, Erin and I keep
work
saying
mode. It's okay.
I just left a work meeting with an Emily, right? I think both Erin and I do this pretty naturally with other families and friends too. So I think I can think of who Erin also has relationships with families that, and I think what it looks like for us is and again, I'm not meaning to speak for you, Erin, but I feel like in my mind, like, we have each other. And then I also have friends, close families of people who are more my kids' ages. So I'm thinking of my 12-year-old's like closest friends, her family too. We, you know, that feels a little bit more natural in the sense of they're both at the same jazz band practice, so let's drive together. They're you know, and I think Erin, I know, because their kids are not the same age, I know Erin also has a community of friends who have kids the same age. I'm not sure. Am I making sense here, Erin?
No,
I hope
absolutely.
Totally,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
So we also have those intersecting, you know, and so I know who kind of Erin's people are, who I really enjoy being with too, but who are like, have the kids the same age, and she knows I think it's the same thing with me, you know, having the age range we do means that our kids, you know, when we get together now, especially a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, did I just get it? Oh, six-year-old. You know, that's a big age span. You know, it makes sense that they love to be with each other, but we also have these other pockets of community. And I see Erin doing the same thing as she does with our family with them too, you know, that like, Erin, I know that there'd be many families who would think like you're a solid person to call when they need support or pick up and, you know, and I know you would do the same thing. And, so I guess that my recipe, I think there is no recipe other than, I know Erin and I are both people who probably are those first people who ask for a cup of sugar, in the sense of wanting to build that community, you know, thinking there's only room for more, not room for less.
Yeah, I think so too. And certainly like we said at the meeting, our personalities, I think it makes that easier for us. Like we're both outgoing and extroverted. So that makes it, I think, easier. But I think like, in terms of a recipe is just, you know, find your people. And like, and I really just do think that it is work, and it's hard too. Like, even though it's relatively easy for me compared to some of my more introverted friends, for example, but at the same time, I mentioned earlier that I didn't recognize community building as a skill until actually it was our former pastor at church, Cameron, when he approached me to do the role I used to do, the job I used to have at the church, which is a community outreach job. He's like, because you're a community builder. And I was kind of like, oh, I guess that is the skill. But I think you know, those people are everywhere, and you know, whether that's doing it yourself or I think so much of the answer to all of the crap that's going on in the world, here we are the day after election day, is, you know, community. And certainly it's behind what I do professionally as well. I mean, is we're stronger if we form these communities, whatever shape they may look like. And we can't do it alone. And I think the more we destroy that narrative of like the superhuman mom who has her can I swear has her shit together all the time, you know, we need to like dismantle that narrative, because none of us are that, and it hurts us all to have this narrative of like this, you know, the have it all, right? Like I have my job and my kids and my house is perfect all the time. Like I think the more that we dismantle that narrative and deconstruct that narrative and say, actually, like, we're all just, you know, kind of a big group mess, but we can do it together, is really so critical in sort of whether or not you're the extrovert person who it finds that part of it easy, finds the like, hey, what do you need? Hi, I'm Erin, you know, part easy or not. I think just the ways that we can, in our own strengths and circles, sort of deconstruct these individualist stories and narratives is so important, because we can't do it in isolation, and we're hurting ourselves, we're, you know, causing so much stress and long-term illness and all of the other things that this kind of epidemic of loneliness, right, that we keep hearing about, and isolation is doing. And just that was a whole long ramble. I don't even know what you asked or what I said, but
it sounded good to me.
Beautifully said, and it tied back into Molly what you talked about earlier of, you know, knowing your likes, your dislikes, your strengths. So somebody else can cook, and you're all organized, and you know, being vulnerable enough to put that out there too, because that's how you work together. Not everybody does all of everything. So I can't thank you enough. As I said in one of my emails, rich and deep. The two of you have really strong and clear voices. And you are such role models. I mean, it gives me hope that your kids and then the layers out who observe this too are going to be able to roll forward and live a different way.
Yeah.
Because they've experienced it and you're continuing to do it, and it's going to continue to evolve.
Well, it was so fun. I can guarantee you what's going to happen. We're going to have the phone, and Erin and I are going to text each other and be like, "Oh my gosh, that was so fun to talk about how much we love each other." But truly, this is, we could, as you can tell, we could sit here and talk about it forever because it's so fun to look back and be like, "Wow, we really." I don't think it's something that Erin and I usually are like, look at this model we've done. But we certainly know it feels much better to have each other in each other's lives than to not. So thanks, Barb, for bringing us together here.
Yeah, well, thank you for being willing. Thank you for being the two of you, because it was so perfect. When I first met the two of you and started hearing your individual stories and your together story, and then to still be in community with you through the various things we do.
Well, and I think I'm eager to hear more about this project and the organization. I think it seems like it's doing important work. So.
Absolutely, and I will keep you posted. Molly, as I mentioned to Erin earlier, it's a slowly evolving project, and it started with grandparenting. It started as a grandparent project of grandparents stepping in and doing shared care, and then the conversation of, it just doesn't have to be your blood relative. It doesn't have to be another generation removed. There's many ways, and as you were reminding me of Kai, and you talked about Kai and Ruby's other families, I'm thinking now of your whole other extended relationship with Reynard's family.
I was just thinking that too.
Step to the academy, and so I'm gonna share that with the project manager, and if you might be willing, maybe come back and talk about that.
Barb, I just have to tell you, I think this is really funny. It's such a small town. So, our chosen family, I already talked about, how we met Molly, and then our other sort of people were John and Angela. And then Molly was obviously us and Reynard and Peter. And Reynard and Peter's people were Molly and John and Angela. And so even though Reynard and Peter and us aren't like really close, there was this beautiful connection between the four of our families. And out of those four, I know them the least. But I just think it's kind of funny that and it took us a while to kind of figure that out, I think, where we were like, oh wait, that's kind of funny.
Wow.
Anyway.
And
that would be fun to do a visual of, right? Yeah.
We're a little square, and there's all sorts of little triangles.
Anyway. And now Kai was telling me yesterday, or sometime this week, he was saying about his family. He said, I'm going to family dinner. And I kind of thought to myself, you're going to family dinner. I knew exactly what he meant. He's going on Sunday nights. He goes to Peter and Reynard's house for family dinner. And he brings his laundry, and he's there. And Peter and Reynard and I have gotten close now in a new way of like, I had COVID. He got out of the infirmary. Reynard texted me. I saw him. He came over I made him Reynard's comfort food, which is Indian curry for Kai. He took a picture. He said, he's fine. He's great. He's going to be okay. And, this idea of now we're doing some shared parenting in a totally different way, this like removed way where I've had to let go a lot, but also know that there are these two dads who love and will help to take care of them. So it's a real, constellations. This is what if you would have asked me 4 years ago, I never would have dreamed this would have happened, because it's not like for us, I ever thought, Kai's going to boarding school, right? He's going to boarding school because there are this family there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah.
it is. And one of his, I guess one of his dorm mates says, how are you having family dinner? You don't even, your family doesn't live here. And he's like, oh, I have like just another, and he's pretty like, I think he doesn't want to throw out that his family is, the family dinner is with the head of school, right? So he's like, oh, we have family friends who are here or whatever, you know? And I just was thinking, I thought, oh, but you know how happy it makes me that every Sunday night, I know exactly where he's going to be, that he's going to have two adults who I love and who love him will be checking in on him and making sure he's okay. And that's why I'm able to let him go, is because of them. So yeah, it is.
That he calls it family dinner too,
Yeah.
right? That he just like, he's like, yeah, it's family dinner.
Family
Like, he doesn't, and his friend is like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, it's family dinner.
Yeah.
So.
And he said he told a professor, he said, I'm sorry, I can't meet. I have family dinner. And I guess his professor said the same thing. Do you have family who lives here? And kind of like, kinda. And, you know, I just was like, yeah, but you know, for him though, Erin, like, I didn't think about this, but he's used to us thinking of how many times we've said we're having family dinner.
Yeah.
And so in his mind,
that's what I mean. I kind of love that.
Yeah.
He just is like
family dinner can be not just our family. I mean, it's like who you make your family. You're right, Barb. I hope it does give me.
Point. Your kids are out there changing the world, right? They just expanded someone's, at least they have two people thinking family. Oh, what is family, right? And you just talked about shared parenting across 1,500 miles, right?
Exactly. Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, unless Erin's picking up my daughter, I have to go to pick up my daughter. No, I'm kidding. I know you're not picking up my daughter.
I can if you need me to.
Anyway. I know. I don't need you to today.
So work and life continue.
Yes.
So thank you both. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you soon.
Nice to talk to you, Barb.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.